Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're gonna talk about the 10 books that I loved the most in 2020. I'm excited, but I do have one problem because here's me talking about books I didn't like. This is me talking about books that I did like. I don't know why. If I don't like a book, I can rant on forever. If I like a book, I don't really get any further than, this was cool, yes, great, nice, please read it. So what I'm gonna try to do in this video is when I talk about the 10 books that I liked the most this year, I'm gonna try to kind of explain when I think you will like this book and to whom I would recommend this book. So let's just get into it, okay? So 2020 was like a ridiculous reading year for me. The Thing in this year, to some people it made them read like way less books than normal. For me it meant I just read way more than usual, and also I discovered audiobooks. I have read, I never really counted it up exactly, but I think it's about 62 or 63 books that I read this year, which is ridiculous for my doing. That's almost double what I would usually read. Also, you will notice that there are quite some contemporary books in my top 10, which is weird. Usually I'm not a contemporary person at all, but this year I've just read some genres that I usually don't read, being contemporaries and mysteries. So that's a nice, how do you call that? Discovery for me, yeah. Okay, let's just hop into it. First, I want to start with an honorable mention for a non-fiction book that I want to recommend. Humankind by Rutger Bregman. This is originally Dutch, but it's translated. This book is like basically this big exposition and exploration of why mankind is good, actually, and naturally good-willing and cooperative. So if you need to restore your faith in humanity, I highly recommend this book. It's very easy to read. Go read it. Okay, next. Let's just go to number 10 on the list. We have, I again don't have barely have any of these books with me, but we have The Puppy War by Ara Fong. This is an adult grimdark fantasy. It's about this girl that gets accepted into the military school because she wants to fight in the war between these two kingdoms, and there are like gods of power that she can tap into, that she has to learn to control. It's very cool. I would recommend this book to people who like Avatar: The Last Airbender, because for some reason it kind of has those same vibes with the elemental magic in it. I would recommend this book to anyone who likes training montages in movies. I would recommend this if you get excited about anti-hero main characters that are a bit power hungry. And last but definitely not least, I would recommend this if you want a fantasy that breaks stereotypes and actually talks about the horrors of war instead of just romanticizing and glorifying it. That's The Puppy War by Ara Fong. Then on number 9 we have a contemporary, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's basically about this woman, Eleanor. She's kind of down and about everything. She doesn't really have a social life or a family life or any life except for her job, but she says she's fine. You know, it's totally fine. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. It's fine. It's been a while since I read this book, but I do remember crying. I recommend this book if you want to read the story about like a sad, forgotten woman who learns to appreciate herself more and just create a better life for herself. It's very wholesome and sad at the same time. Then on number 8 we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book was so good. Oh, I said in my worst books of 2020 video that I was trying to get into adult romance. Get a Life, Chloe Brown was like the first adult romance book this year that I read that I was like, yes, I have solidified now that I like this genre and I like these kind of books. It's basically just a romance about a grumpy graphic designer who falls in love with her superintendent, who's an artist. And it's very cute and very funny. The girl main character has chronic illness. The guy main character is recovering from an abusive relationship. I would recommend this if you love a good romance with a lot of smut. I would not recommend it if you don't like the use of crass words in your smut. I would recommend this to anyone who loves a good himbo boyfriend. I would recommend this if you're into the grumpy versus sunshine pairing. And what I personally really liked about this book that sets it apart to the few other adult romances that I read this year is that the will they won't they actually continues throughout the book, and I liked that. Then on number 7 we have 1984 by George Orwell. I hate putting this on this list because it makes me feel like a very pompous, pretentious person, but it's just good, okay? It lives up to its hype. It's a good classic dystopian. Just read it. I would recommend it if you just want to read about why authoritarianism is bad, actually. If you want to read a story that gives some good political critique. If you want to read about how important it is for people to think critically. And also, if you are okay with like dystopian stories that are very high on the exposition and message and maybe a little weaker on the plot and the characters. Then on number 6 we have another classic, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, aka one of my new favorite classics. This is the story of Dorian Gray, a socialite, a very beautiful person who is loved by everyone, young man who loves his face, and everyone else also loves his face. Someone makes a painting of him. The painting starts growing older, and Dorian Gray remains young. I would recommend this to everyone who is tired of redemption arcs and just wants a corruption arc of a character that just slowly kind of falls into a pit of darkness. I would recommend this if you like reading about characters that have pretentious conversations with each other. And I would recommend this book if you were a hopeless romantic and would like to feel deep for it. Then on number 5 we have To Kill a Kingdom by Alessandra Christo. Beautiful, beautiful YA fantasy. It's one of those classic YA stories where we follow two perspectives, a boy and a girl. The boy is a prince who wants to kill the sirens, and the girl is a siren who wants to kill princes, but she gets turned into a human and thereby infiltrates the ship of the prince, and the rest of the story is basically just about pirates and pirates going on a journey. Very cool. I would recommend this if you still get very excited about YA stories that follow two characters that are just struggling with their identity, struggling with what they want to do in their lives, struggling with the expectations that others have put on them. I would recommend this if you love a good hate to love romance that's very vital to the plot, but still remains on the back burner throughout the story and never actually takes over the plot. I would recommend it if you like pirates. And I would also recommend it if you're not bored by journey stories, where it's just the characters kind of going along different countries. Personally, it makes me feel very nostalgic and at home, but I can see that some people would find it boring. I would also recommend it if you're okay with lackluster world building. And last but not least, I would recommend it if you want a YA fantasy standalone. We need more of those. Okay, so the last 4 books, I couldn't rank them. I didn't know how to put them in the ranking. So the last 4 books, they're just all the best books that I read this year. I want to start off with the most obvious one, just to get it out of the way. And that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, because I am Leigh Bardugo trash and Dark Academia trash. So what else could I do but love this book? I would recommend this to anyone who likes Dark Academia, because this one takes place at Yale, but also likes it with a sprinkle of fantasy elements, because in this one the secret societies at Yale all practice some kind of dark art of magic. I would recommend this if you're okay with dark themes, graphic situations and violence. I'd recommend looking up the content warnings for this one. I personally liked how dark and gritty it was. I'd also recommend this if you like occult themes and ghosts, because they play a very large role in the story. It's not super high on the fantasy elements. It's just kind of like these little sprinkles of magic, occult magic. And I would also recommend this if you're into mentor-mentee romances. It's not, there's barely any romance in the book, but you know, we take what we can get. So, next book that was one of my favorites this year that I also talked about before is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. Who knew that YA contemporary could be on my favorite lists? But here it is. So this is the story about a girl named Frances who was in her last year of secondary school in the UK. She's doing her best to get like the best grades to get into Cambridge. I think she wants to get into Cambridge. And then at the same time, she's a really big fan of this podcast that she draws fan art for. And she meets the person who does this podcast. And I know the plot doesn't necessarily sound super interesting, but it's not really about the plot. It's mostly about the characters and the themes. I would recommend this if you want to read a YA contemporary that is not about romance, but instead about a beautiful friendship. I would recommend this book to anyone that is or can relate to struggling with what the heck you want to do with your life and your future. I recommend this to anyone who was that kid in high school that always got the good grades. And I would also recommend this to anyone who wants to read a beautiful book about identity, sexuality, family, etc. Then the third book that is in my top books of the year is actually kind of like a series, but especially the first book in the series, and that is the 5th season from the Broken Earth trilogy. This one's interesting because when I first read it, I knew I liked it, but I didn't expect it to be like one of my top favorite books of 2020. But the more I thought about and the longer it was that I read it, the more I realized that it was still just kept being there in the back of my mind. I will now confidently put it at my top books of 2020. This is an adult fantasy. How do I even explain this? Oh god, this book's very difficult to explain. We follow the perspectives of these 3 women navigating this post-apocalyptic world. Like a 5th season is kind of like when there's like an apocalypse, and it just happens every 1,000 years, you know, just happens. No big deal. I would recommend this book to anyone who wants to read an adult fantasy with a science fiction feel to it, because there's a lot of like science fiction-y elements in it with these like floating crystals in the sky. I would recommend it if you don't mind if your science fiction fantasy gets a bit weird sometimes. Also, I would recommend this if you're okay with second-person narrative. One of their perspectives is written in second person, so it's you did this, you did that, which to a lot of people could be very off-putting, but I thought it really added something to the story and was a very good narrative choice. I'd recommend this if you want to read about a very unique magic system that is based on earthquakes and geology. I'd recommend this if you want to read about themes of oppression, history, and motherhood. And last but definitely not least, I would recommend this if you want to be baffled by the narrative choices in this book. Trust me. And then the last book that is in my top books of 2020 is one that I haven't even talked about on this channel yet because I just finished it a few days ago, but if you follow me on Twitter, you know which one it is, and that is The Silvered Serpents by Roshni Chokshi. This is the second book in the Gilded Wolves trilogy. I have a really hard time recommending this book because I know that like a lot of people who start this series don't like it, or they DNF it, or they're just very lukewarm about it, and I honestly don't understand why. I wish I understood it, but I'm just, why is not everyone a big fan of this series? It's so good. This series is alternate history that takes place in 19th century France, and we follow a bunch of characters going on heists. I recommend this one if you like heist stories. I really recommend this if you like those stories that are a found family, where you follow the POV of each of the main characters in the found family. And it's very focused on their personalities and like their backstories. I recommend this if you are okay with a very soft magic system. I think this is the thing that most people kind of don't like about this book. It's an original magic system called forging that is basically about the power of God. So giving something a power that it doesn't originally have, which does end up in the fact that basically anything is possible. Very, very soft magic system, barely any rules, and it's often used to solve problems, which I personally didn't really mind, but I can understand that a lot of people would be upset about that. And then I would recommend this book if you love mythology. The whole point of this book is that it takes place in our world, and the idea is that every mythology was real and that it has all influenced history. Things that happen in the plot are mostly pulled from Hindu mythology, Greek mythology, and there's also a lot of biblical references. And you know, I eat that shit up. I love it. And then I would also really recommend it if you're really into riddles and puzzles, because the characters constantly have to solve riddles and puzzles, and it just makes me very happy every time I open this book and there's a bunch of riddles right there. Just makes me happy, and I want more books to do this. So please read this series. Just want more people to love this series the way that I do. I really hope that that list kind of gave you an idea of which one of those books that I loved you might love as well. Please let me know what your favorite books were in the comments so we can all give each other recommendations. Also, if you don't follow me on my social media yet, you should follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I make very, very good mediocre content, so you don't want to miss out on that one. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon in another one. Goodbye.